Bismillah, alhamdulillah, as-salatu was-salam ala rasulillah, Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to 30 Du'as that changed the world. My name is Ustad Sahil. In this episode, we are going to look at the du'as of Musa alayhi salam. And in particular, we're also going to focus on the du'a of Asiya. Now, just to give some context and background, Musa alayhi salam, of course, was separated from his mother at birth when she was ordered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to cast him in a basket into the river Nile. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had a plan for him that he will grow up in the palace of Pharaoh, the very enemy who he will challenge when he grows up. He grew up in the palace of Pharaoh, and he grew up under the careful guidance of the wife of Pharaoh, Asiya. And one of the miracles of the story of Musa alayhi salam is how, despite being adopted by Pharaoh, he still is suckled by his original birth mother, subhanallah. Now, as Musa grows up, the Prophet ﷺ described his physical form. The Prophet ﷺ described him as tiwal, extremely tall. He is described as shadid, powerfully built. He's clearly a man who doesn't stand around when things are going wrong and people are being oppressed. You'll remember the famous story of when he arrives at the well of Madian on the brink of starvation, dehydration, walking for 10 days. His shoes are worn out, his feet are bleeding, but still he steps in to help those two ladies who are not able to water their sheep. That's the kind of character Musa alayhi salam has. He doesn't stand around when things are going wrong. When he came back and saw that his people had worshipped the calf once they crossed the river, he immediately, the Quran describes, grabbed the beard of his brother and shook his head. So Musa has that nature, that element of harshness, that element of stepping in, which is something positive and not standing idly by when things are going wrong. So before prophethood, there is a description of an incident where Musa alayhi salam is out one day at the time where people are normally taking their afternoon nap due to heat. And he notices one of the Bani Israel arguing with one of the Egyptians. And he steps in. He steps in to support the Bani Israel who in his perception is being oppressed. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes what happens in Surah Al-Qasas, how he strikes out at the man across the head and the man falls down dead. This is accidental murder. He did not mean to kill him. It was not premeditated. He simply struck out in defense of the man from Bani Israel, recognizing that he was being oppressed by this Egyptian Coptic. And his strength and his power is such that the man with one strike falls down dead. Now in verse 16 of Surah Al-Qasas, Musa alayhi salam mentions, قال ربي إني ظلمت نفسي فاغفر لي فغفر له إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. The rough translation of this verse is, he said, my Lord, indeed I have wronged myself, so forgive me. And he forgave him, indeed he is the forgiving, the merciful. Subhanallah. This dua has so much that we can learn from it. Musa alayhi salam commits a mistake, a serious mistake, accidental murder. But his depth of understanding of religion is such that he knows he must turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and seek his forgiveness, regardless of how serious the crime is. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually informs in this verse, فَغَفَرَ لَهُ, and he forgives him. Despite being pre-prophethood by a considerable amount of time, it's at least another 10 odd years before Musa becomes a prophet. Despite growing up in a society where nobody is allowed to mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know this from the story of the lady who used to comb the hair of the daughter of Pharaoh. She once dropped her comb and she said, Bismillah. And the daughter of Pharaoh said, did you mean my father? And she said, no, I mean Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Pharaoh was so enraged that he executed her in the most terrible possible way just for mentioning the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Musa alayhi salam, despite growing up in this society, he knows to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He knows how to seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, what is the actual crime that he has committed? It might seem obvious, but the scholars of tafsir discuss it in some detail. They say what the crime he has committed is that he has killed a person without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do we know this? Because on the Day of Judgment, according to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when human beings are left waiting for judgment and they are suffering for 50,000 years standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just waiting for the judgment, and they perceive in their minds wrongly that just the waiting is worse than anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared for them. So they go and they ask the prophets for intercession. They go to Ibrahim alayhi salam. They go to Isa alayhi salam. They also go to Musa alayhi salam. And at that point he mentions this. He says, I have killed a soul which I was not given permission to kill. So that's the exact definition of what he did wrong. Not just kill somebody, but kill a soul which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had not given him permission to kill. Now subhanallah, reflect on this fact. Musa alayhi salam did this pre-prophethood. He did not even have knowledge of wahy at this time, revelation. But still, in the hereafter, after completing his whole mission, he still is worried about this sin. He still counts it against himself. He is so terrified of this sin, despite the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forgiven him, that he counts it against himself, and he says to human beings as they come to him, I cannot intercede with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because I killed a soul which I was not given permission to do. SubhanAllah, the prophets have a level of anxiety about their sins far above other people. And that's how we need to be. When you commit a sin, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is oft forgiving, most merciful. Yes, if you turn to Him, He will forgive you. But don't treat it as something so trivial. You need to have anxiety, you need to have worry that the sins you have committed will come back and haunt you. On the Day of Judgment, you must answer for those sins. Musa alayhi salam, despite knowing he's been forgiven, holds it against himself and is worried about it on the Day of Judgment. Now let's have another look at a dua from one of the ladies who was responsible for the tarbiyah of Musa, for nurturing Musa, which is Asiya. In Surah Tahrim, verse 11, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِمْرَأَةَ فِرْعَوْنَ إِذْ قَالَتْ رَبِّ ابْنِ لِي عِنْدَكَ بَيْتًا فِي الْجَنَّةِ وَنَجِّنِي مِنْ فِرْعَوْنَ وَعَمَلِهِ وَنَجِّنِي مِنَ الْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ. The rough translation of that is, and Allah sets forth an example to those who believe, the wife of Pharaoh, when she said, my Lord, build for me a house with you in paradise, and deliver me from Pharaoh and his doing, and deliver me from the oppressive and unjust people. Subhanallah. The Prophet ﷺ described 4 women who reached perfection. In authentic hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, from amongst the women of the world who have reached perfection are the following. He mentioned Maryam, the daughter of Imran, Khadija, the daughter of Khuwaylid, Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad, and Asiya, the wife of Pharaoh. So she is one of the 4 great women who attained perfection in her life. It's amazing that 2 of the women who attained perfection in their lives are from the family and the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, Khadija and Fatima. She had a very high level and depth of understanding of religion. So let's look in detail at her dua. And subhanAllah, the scholars of tafsir explain that she made this dua at the time when Pharaoh was about to execute her, when he knew that she was a believer, and when he was torturing her with stakes. At this point, she makes the dua. That dua, that, oh Allah, build for me a house with you. رَبِّ ابْنِ لِي عِنْدَكَ بَيْتًا فِي الْجَنَّةِ. She is the queen of Egypt. She has access to all the greatest palaces of the world, but she sacrifices all of that in favor of faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And look, what does she ask for? Even before asking for a house in paradise, she asks for closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Indak, close to you. Not just any house in paradise, but a house close to you. And she says close to you before she actually says house in paradise. It's a bit difficult to translate in English, but in the Arabic, indaka comes before baytan fil jannah. Close to you comes before a house in paradise. Now, a point to reflect on, which many people neglect, is that Asiya was a believer. Her husband is Pharaoh, who is the most evil tyrant ever to live on the face of the earth. But she doesn't plot against him. She doesn't, in the middle of night, wake up, take a knife and slit his throat. Why? Because the institution of marriage is something sacred. She is a believer. She knows he is the greatest tyrant ever to live. But she is his wife and he is her husband. And she does not betray the institution of marriage. Instead, she is loyal to Islam. She is loyal to her belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And she faces the torture which he hands out to her, and she does not renege on her faith. She does not apostate. She does not choose the palaces and the glitter of this dunya, but she chooses loyalty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but yet she does not betray that institution of marriage. هذا وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.